Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. The nation is still talking about the effects of demonetization. The impact on the economy is being seen now, especially in rural areas, in the informal sector. People are still standing in queues. We had on the 1st of this month people queuing up to collect salaries. That process was also not smooth either. We are told that the time taken for replacing the entire currency, 86% of the 1,000 and 500 rupee notes, will take anywhere between 5 to 7 months. God alone knows. There is no clear indication coming from the government. Now, to discuss the impact on the economy in the short, medium and long term, we have with us Professor Pronab Sen, who is a former chief statistician of India and an eminent economist. And why we have him in our studios is that he was the first economist to say that the impact of demonetization, in fact within 3-4 days of the announcement, he said that the impact of demonetization will be of this scale, will be very severe in the rural and informal sector of the economy, which is what we are seeing now. And the government has set up special task forces to figure out what's going on in rural areas where bank branches to population ratio is very low. So to discuss that, we have Dr. Pronab Sen with us. Welcome to our show, Pronab Sen. So you had kind of figured this a bit earlier than others. Now, please tell us, what do you anticipate now over the next 3 months, 6 months? What kind of shock is the economy going through? Demand shock, supply shock, productivity shock?
Let me tell you my first fear, and in a sense I think my overriding fear at this stage. It is that technically and legally the entire Indian banking system is a defaulter.
Okay.
Okay? You know, the government...
Why do you say technically and legally?
Because a default in the case of the banking sector means that if I go to my bank with a check and the bank is unable to honor it.
Okay. In that sense, yeah.
Yeah, then the bank is a defaulter.
Yeah.
Now, it is entirely within the powers of government to impose just and reasonable restrictions on my withdrawals.
Yeah.
But if the banks are unable to comply with that limit, then the bank is a defaulter.
Okay. So now, you're saying that limit is fine, but if they are not able to fulfill even that limit.
24,000 per week. When the average citizen goes, he either doesn't get anything, which is a default, or he gets less than the 24,000.
Which is also a partial default.
Which is a partial default. So the banks are being forced to, in a sense, ration the amount of currency that's being sent to them. It's not the bank's fault. But the point is that legally they are at fault. They are liable. And we are a very litigious nation. And my fear is that if some excitable soul goes to court with this, the court may actually end up saying that no, what the bank is doing is okay and invoke force majeure. It opens, to my mind, a very dangerous precedent. Because then what happens, you're in a sense telling the bank that it's up to you to honor an entire amount or only a partial amount of withdrawals from your account. Now, if that's the sort of thing that gains currency, then the faith in the banking system is going to be severely dented.
Will this have a long-term impact on the faith in the banking system?
It could. It could. So as I said, this is my immediate fear, because we are in there now. But I think there's a whole bunch of other problems that the banks are facing, which I think we need to be very clear about. The second is that the banks actually, contrary to popular opinion, have a very large exposure to the smaller, not so much the informal, but the smaller units.
The SMEs, the small businesses,
a lot of whom operate on cash.
Yeah.
All right? We don't know how much of this is going to turn NPA. Now, this you have to read in the context of the Mudra. The government's Mudra thing, which I thought was a great initiative.
Mudra Bank.
Mudra Bank. As far as Mudra loans are concerned, I am told that 5 crore loans have been given. 5 crores, that's not a joke. All of these are very small amounts. I would imagine all of them.
You mean 5 crore in numbers?
In numbers. The amounts, I have no idea what they are. But they're 5 crore loans. Likelihood of this entire lot turning NPAs is very high. Okay, the banks have a certain amount of leeway. You don't declare an NPA till 3 months.
Yeah.
So, but the point is 3 months later, this may actually come and bite you in the neck.
Yeah.
So that's danger number 2. Danger number 3 is today the banks cannot issue fresh credit. They can continue to honor the credit they've already been given.
A lot of NBFCs are witnessing negative credit growth. Yeah. You're right.
Credit.
Yeah.
So what we are looking at is a situation that if I take the Indian economy and put it in 2 parts, the cash economy and the credit economy, the cash economy is already in deep trouble because the cash isn't there.
Yeah.
If you start seeing no growth in credit, where will growth in the Indian economy come from? You need one or the other to grow. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this.
What about this narrative? Actually, Pranab, what you're saying is borne out by the bank stocks. Stock prices have gone tanking over the last 10 days. But in the initial 10 days, they went up.
Yeah.
So, in the initial 10 days, I think the market bought into the larger government narrative that banks will be flush with funds and they will be able to reduce interest rates, and they'll get lubricated, and some of their recapitalization issues could be resolved as extinguished black money will come to the RBI and government can use it to recapitalize banks, etc. But now, the last 10 days, what you are saying seems to be what the market is trying to internalize. The other difficulties that banks may face.
Well, this is only a part. So we've got increase in NPA, very high probabilities of fairly large, substantial amounts in a situation where the NPA problem is already serious.
Yeah.
Right. Second, no new credit growth. Right. But deposit growth massive. So
even these deposits may get withdrawn, no? By and by.
Well, they may or may not. It doesn't matter. As your liability has gone up.
Yeah.
And you're not being able to.
And they're getting pushed into higher CRR, which is giving the banks.
Well, even if it goes to an MSS.
Okay.
Then
now it can go to MSS because the MSS limit is increased.
That's right.
Okay.
The third, as I said, so second is NPAs going up. The problem of not being able to extend credit. And the fourth being, of course, the rather obvious one, which we have no figures on, which is we don't know how much the banks are spending in this huge operation. Because the entire cost of remonetization of the economy is being borne by the banking sector. It's not being borne by the government.
Yeah.
All right? So all in all.
Can you just explain that a little in a more sort of simple way? The cost of remonetization?
You see, what happens is that the RBI uses its currency chests to pass money on to the banks, from which point they take over in terms of distributing the money, getting the exchange done, then issuing it. So the transport, the whole logistical operation is managed by the banks.
That cost is all borne by the bank, you're right, yeah.
All of it is borne by the bank. So all in all, from whether you're looking at it from the cost side or the credit side, the banks, I think, are in trouble. We probably won't know for 2-3 months.
Okay.
And I think everybody is praying that in those 2-3 months things will get sorted out. But these are going to be legacies that the banking sector is going to have to face. So we are then potentially looking at a recapitalization issue, which would be significantly larger than what we were looking at earlier.
At the moment, it's about 4 lakh crore, they say, recapitalization needs.
And this may go up even further. All right. So the whole belief that from sometime next year, we are going to move to a credit-driven, bank-intermediated economy, which rests critically on the health and the reputation of the banking sector. Both are compromised. And I don't see the recognition coming out clearly in terms of the articulation, whether by the banks themselves or by the government. And this worries me.
Okay.
Right? So because we already know that the poor are going to suffer. That was my first take. That's done. that's going to continue to happen. Efforts are being made, fine. But this is the other thing which is going to happen. And
so essentially what you're talking, in fact, you're talking about something new. It's a financial sector shock.
It is a massive one.
Okay. So what sort of impact can this have on growth generally?
Very large.
Okay.
Okay, which is why I'm saying that this belief that growth is not going to be
in a sense, Pranab, the government claims it's doing all this to actually restore the health of finance sector.
Yeah.
But the effect could exactly be the opposite, you're saying. Yeah.
This is my take.
Okay. Yeah. So what impact do you think will this have on growth?
Well,
because they've been varying estimates. Dr. Manmohan Singh has said that at least in this financial year, it will be 2 percentage points deceleration in GDP growth. Some private research firms like Ambit have said more than 2 percentage points, maybe 3.5 percentage points they're talking about. So some say maybe 1 or less than 1. The more optimistic estimate is less than 1. So where do you stand in this?
Well, you see, all of these calculations are based on one central theory, which is the quantity theory of money, which is that if the money supply is reduced, it has an impact on transactions, that reduces
on economic activity.
On economic activity, right? However, this particular theory assumes that there are no disruptions. It's a smooth transition downwards. What we are talking about now is a disruption. If disruptions take place, then the damage can be orders of magnitude larger.
Okay.
All right? We don't know how large it is because we don't know the extent of the disruptions that will happen or can happen.
So do you think if this entire currency had been replaced in, say, let's say 2 months' time, I'm just giving taking a ballpark, the disruption would have been far less?
Yes. You see, ultimately, it hinges on one thing, which is the carrying capacity of the system. How long can the system carry on without liquidity? In a country like India, where a very large chunk of our economy, more than 45%, is in the informal sector, and another largest chunk is SME, the corporates account for only about 20%. The carrying capacity is probably not that large. That is the problem. So the shorter the duration of remonetization, the much less would have been the impact, and we could have possibly forestalled this kind of disruptive things that I'm talking about. Longer the duration, the probability of disruption becomes that much. It just goes up exponentially.
How do you respond, Pranab Sen, to the fact that the government had initially estimated that of the 14.5 lakh crore which is being replaced in 1,000 and 500 rupee notes, about 3 lakh crore minimum was the government's estimate, would get extinguished as black money. It won't come back to the system. Therefore, in the RBI balance sheet, that will be a kind of slack which RBI could then give to the government as additional fiscal space, right? Now, as we see money getting pushed into the banking system even by illegitimate means, a lot of people are suggesting, experts are saying that nearly everything is coming back into the banking system. So is this a big miscalculation according to you? The fact that if virtually 95% of the money gets replaced, so what happens to your calculation about that big chunk of black money that you wanted to extinguish and therefore and consequently give fiscal space to the government?
Well, those are two different questions.
As
far as extinguishing the black money is concerned, clearly if all of it comes back, then identifying that black money will go back to what we were trying to do before.
Exactly.
Which is you have IT, income tax rates and so on, try and unearth who had assets disproportionate to income, that sort of stuff. We are back to that ball game. And we know how far that goes.
In fact, we are already back to it. In the middle of this whole thing, they came up with an income declaration scheme, which shows the government's lack of confidence that
things are going to happen. So that's the other one, which is the fiscal space that the government was supposed to get. That, in a sense, is a lot more serious, because what you're saying then is that a large cost is being borne without a commensurate gain.
Yeah. Because
originally, if you think of the calculations of one I talked about, I was estimating a loss of 1 to 3% and a gain to government of about 1.5%.
Okay.
Okay. So it was roughly balancing out.
Yeah. Right? Now it's not balancing.
Now the negative starts looking a lot larger than the positive.
Yeah.
So
because the government's premise was that in the longer run, this fiscal space will be used to re-lubricate the economy and neutralize the losses that the economy would suffer in the short run, right?
Yeah.
So now that balance is getting a bit disrupted again?
It looks like it.
Huh?
Yeah. And as I said, that now earlier my worry was that you could use this to recompense the poor for what they had lost and the pain that they're bearing. Now my fear is you may not have enough to recompensate the banks.
Yeah.
In which case the damage will become, so if you're not being able to recapitalize the banking system with these gains, then you're riding a tiger.
In fact, Pronab Sen, if your thesis of financial sector shock bears out, then the costs will be way higher than any payoff that we may get in the long run, is it?
That's what scares me, yes.
So what can the government do now? Say we'll be seeing a budget in another 2 months. Maybe there's some speculation the budget may be announced earlier. So can some correctives be taken?
Well, let's start with a couple of immediate ones.
Yeah.
First, and I think the most important, the government needs to issue an order which in some sense protects the banks in the short run. And this is something that they can issue. I mean, it will have to have a sunset clause, which means it lasts up to so and so day, and then it can be extended. But in the absence of that cover, the banks are very vulnerable. Number one.
But the bank chiefs seem to be very complacent. They seem to think that this is a great thing which will help the banks in the longer run.
Well, I hope they're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be
maybe they're not looked at the macros as yet, in that sense.
Maybe they haven't. Okay. The second thing is, I think a clear-eyed decision will have to be taken in extending the consumer's pain.
Okay.
Don't be in a hurry to reduce the withdrawal limits.
Okay.
First, let the banking system strengthen itself.
Okay.
So that we can go back to business as usual. Don't be in a hurry to do it.
To remove the withdrawal limits?
To remove the withdrawal limits.
So you're saying that you persist with the limits?
For longer than perhaps you had planned.
Because
not just...
There's an anticipation that after 31st December, they will be relaxed.
It would be very dangerous.
Dangerous.
It would be very dangerous.
And maybe even difficult to relax.
No, and if you do that, you will actually see a proper run on the banks and you will have no legal fiction. So you need to create that legal fiction, and that cannot come from the banking sector itself. That sets a wrong precedent. It must come from government.
Yeah.
Okay. These are two urgent steps, and they should be done
immediately.
Now.
And this is to obviously to prevent any possibility of a big financial sector shock. As you had said.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So. And what about the real economy? I mean, you've said so much about the informal sector, the small and medium industry, rural sector, farm sector. Now, this has come at a time when rural wage growth, as it were, was already down to
less than 5%.
Yeah, about 2-3%. Rural demand was actually very sluggish, which was reflecting in the consumer goods. Consumption being very sort of flat, growth being very flat. So, how will this play out now?
Badly. You see, the problem that is going to, and is in fact cropping up, I mean, it's nothing new. The only piece of good news we've had at the moment is that the Rabi sowing is running ahead of last year's.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's
the area, yeah.
The area under cultivation. Now, that's good news. The bad news is that this is a normal year. And the Rabi sowing is running well below the sowing during a normal year that we've had in the past. Okay. So you're better than last year, but you're way behind normal.
Yeah. And there is some doubt about productivity.
That's
because a lot of farmers missed, in many areas, missed that 10-day window when there was a cash crunch.
Well, that's only one part of it. The second part of it, again, from what one hears anecdotally, farm labor is not getting the kind of work it used to get. Much more reliance is being placed on family labor. So a large chunk of farm labor is essentially unemployed at a time when they should be fully employed. Yeah? So that
have an impact on unemployment growth there.
Over that period. Now, in the sowing, what we do not know now, because we only know about the area, we do not know what is the input that's gone in. Is it up to the normal, or is that subnormal as well? So the first indication that we are going to get as to what's going to happen to agriculture will not be the first advance estimate, which is only area sown. And that's going to come in January anyway. The real one you're going to get is the one that's going to come in February. Which is the second advance estimate. And that's when you will know how bad things are.
Tell me, Pranab, one sector which almost everyone says will be badly affected is the land real estate sector. Now, it has had real estate sector has taken a big shock. And we all know that the stock of black money, when you talk about the stock, real estate is one of the biggest kind of retainer of the stock of black money, right? Now, what impact will this have on the real estate sector? I hear two views. One is that the real estate prices will come down, housing prices will come down, so therefore demand could go up. But then the other view is that there will be a huge negative wealth effect in the real estate sector, and that will have a negative impact on growth. So how do these two factors play out?
That's tough to say, right? But what is easy to say is,
it's a bit like, just to simplify, when oil prices collapsed by 50-60%, people said, oh, this is great for consumption, but then a lot of people said, but there will be a huge negative wealth effect, right? So oil is an asset class also. It's similar situation.
No, it's much worse.
Much.
Oil is a very small asset class. Real estate is a very large asset class.
In India,
In India. Now, on this it's difficult to say. But what is absolutely certain is construction is taking a hit. And don't forget, construction is the second highest employer after agriculture.
One of the biggest,
After agriculture.
Agriculture.
The knock-on effects of this, now construction is virtually at zero. This again has huge knock-on effects. Because construction also has very strong backward linkages. So I'm not particularly worried about the real estate sector. As you said, there are wealth effects that are involved, both positive and negative.
But the knock-on effects of the
construction sector, which generates jobs, which generates activity, which contributes to GDP.
Steel, paints, all kinds of things.
A whole range of industries depend on it. That is worrying.
So there could be potentially a lot of bad news. Thank you very much for talking to us, Dr. Pronab Sen.
You're welcome.
That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.